To start, this is the tagline, Next Generation Advanced Caching Technology, and that's a theme that goes through all of our product development, through our market focus, and through the products that we deliver. At the bottom, you will see a link to our Knowledge Center. This is a site on the SuperLumin website where we keep product downloads, access to evaluation licenses, how-to documents, tricks and tips, and a few how-to videos that are probably getting a little long in the tooth, but we will get Hashem back engaged on that, play with some of his favorite toys, and update those videos before too long. By way of introduction, SuperLumin Networks is a division of StrataCache. StrataCache is based in Dayton. SuperLumin is based in Salt Lake City, where we have our development center. The developers that live there, the lead team, has over 150 years of combined proxy design and engineering experience, working with every generation of caching proxy product Novell ever released, Cisco, Arroyo, and others. These are not any kind of rookies on the team whatsoever, and we have taken a view of the caching market focusing on the future. We know that it went through a number of cycles where it was most important for a long time to share access or to manage access to that 56K ISDN line that you had coming out of your organization, and the need for the caching seemed to decline as bandwidth went up, and then something funny happened, and it's called YouTube and video and rich media, and users discovered ways to chew up however much bandwidth you could purchase on their behalf. That has been the focus of the development, caching the streaming medium, as well as carrying forward all of the security and access control that you are familiar with from the board manager days. This is our basic agenda. I don't want to spend a lot of time reviewing the basic product, but it is important to get a baseline set for everyone on the line. Want to cover some of the recent developments between Novell and SuperLumin, talk about the scaling capabilities that we have with this product, and then we have some updates on previous updates, past updates, the currently shipping 2.4, and the most anticipated Nemesis 3.0 coming next year. So, for those that are new to Nemesis, prepare for the fire hose to be opened. This is most of a presentation slapped into one busy slide, so I apologize for the aesthetics here, but this pretty much summarizes the capabilities and the capacity of the SuperLumin proxy cache. We provide transparent proxy services, forward, reverse proxy, generic proxy services, FTP proxy services, what is essentially a DNS proxy service, all built on 64-bit SUSE Linux Enterprise 11. Version 2.4 adds support for Service Pack 2, or incorporates, I should say, SLES 11 SP2, which provides access to all of the latest, greatest hardware that the major vendors are releasing to this point. The scalability is a very critical piece of our strategy. Everything from very tiny devices you could almost put in your pocket to racks full of equipment supporting most of a national network for Southeastern Asia country. All of the access control and management that you are comfortable with, familiar with, depend on in a border manager type of implementation are implemented in SuperLumin Nemesis. The policy-based access control is a next generation for what you are going to be familiar with, and it's easier to compare that structure and available complexity, sophistication, more to the Novell IDM world than the flat rule set that you would have on a border manager server. All the authentication, policy-based access control, big improvements in logging and reporting out of the box over what you will have with your border manager box. That has been one of the long-standing weaknesses that customers have complained about, and something that we've addressed in adding the capabilities to the product and in partnering with third parties to provide different reporting packages from WebSpy, Siphon, Chainsaw, and others. We take advantage of SUSE Linux in incorporating the firewall, IP tables, packet filtering, VPN technology, and wrap those technologies up in our management framework. So we aren't reinventing those wheels. We are making them more accessible and easier to work with. For the single sign-on, we have the same end result as the trusty client trust application that you would run with Border Manager. We are using LDAP on the back end, and we are running as a service. That's kind of the Reader's Digest edition of differences between client trust and the SuperLumin single sign-on. We can answer questions that you might have offline afterwards if you have them. The streaming media, as I mentioned, is something we focused on. We start with the hard stuff, and the rest is easy. Content filtering is available from Content Keeper, the one package that does actually run on the SuperLumin server. We work with many different off-box solutions, either inline or other configurations. And we have some news here for our existing users that centralized management with Activia, which is another StrataCache company, has been ported back to support the caches from SuperLumin. So we have the ability to manage hundreds, dozens, thousands of caches from a single console. And we're also doing more integration with Omnicast, which is another StrataCache company focused on content distribution. One of the biggest points of confusion in working with customers up front with SuperLumin is understanding the whole architecture. We install as a software appliance. We are a software company. We give you an ISO that you can put on a CD. When you boot from that CD, whatever was on the server before will be gone. In its place will be a shiny new SuperLumin Nemesis server ready to go. It is based certainly on SUSE Linux Enterprise 11. It should not actually be treated as a general purpose Linux server. We have a minimized version of the Linux install, just enough to do what SuperLumin caching, access controls, firewall, VPN, all of the pieces that are a part of the SuperLumin offering in Linux. In order to find a suitable piece of hardware, you can go to the Yes Certified page at Novell and verify that it is certified to run SUSE Linux 11, x86, 64, any service pack level, whether it's the FCS version, SP1, or SP2. We do support VMware, and most of the customers we work with that want to set up an evaluation will take advantage of that. This is supported, but definitely not recommended across the board. It is very easy to overrun what a VM, the number of resources, the amount of resources that you can take advantage of in a virtual machine. So if you have more than a few hundred users, it's definitely not the best choice. And even with number of users below that, depending upon the activity and what you're asking your server to do, you may not get the best support or the best performance from that. As a part of StrataCache, we do offer fully configured hardware appliances, and we'll talk a little more about that in the scaling section, but we have engineered a number of hardware platforms from very small to massive to meet different requirements, from small retail organization to small school to entire school districts to entire countries. You tell me what you need, I will build you a server that can take care of it. Again, we focus on this hard stuff first. This is part of the mindset from these mutants out in Utah that are responsible for the code, and I know some of them are listening, and they're on mute, so they have no way to respond to that. Sorry, Hashem. Sorry, Mark. But caching of YouTube, Facebook, Netflix, these are not trivial tasks, and it's the kind of functionality that really requires a solid foundation and attention to what it takes to cache streaming media. So the various optimizations, from making sure that the video that users are calling from 13 different Akamai servers is actually cached once and not duplicated in the cache. Solve the protocol level issues. Managing not just entire objects, but managing ranges of this streaming media as if it were an object. So, what's up with Novell and SuperLumin? As many of you are undoubtedly aware, back in 2010, Novell and SuperLumin entered into an agreement to have Novell sell and support SuperLumin Nemesis as the official replacement for Novell Border Manager. That agreement was scheduled to expire last spring. Things were still active enough that Novell decided to extend it, and it will be expired as of November 1st of this year. The good news is, for customers that require technical support and are current on their maintenance, you are able to call directly to the SuperLumin Technical Support Department. So very often, anything that got just a little complex working through the Novell support channels, we ended up involved anyway. So there will be no middleman on the support. Your maintenance will be purchased as it expires or is coming up through SuperLumin directly or through one of our reseller partners. We have loose affiliations with a lot of the existing Novell partners across the world, and several that have stepped up and are working very closely with our technical and sales organizations. SuperLumin Nemesis still is Novell's recommended upgrade path for Border Manager customers. And we take that very seriously, and we'll continue to provide excellent support, excellent enhancements, continued enhancements to the product, specifically for our valued Border Manager customers. If you are one of the customers that purchased SuperLumin from Novell, either straight out purchased it or took advantage of the promotion that was running for quite a while that entitled you to SuperLumin with the purchase of so many years of Border Manager, quote unquote, support and maintenance, you probably or should have received messages from both Novell and from SuperLumin. If you have not and are interested in more information, have questions of any kind, you can contact SuperLumin directly. The email would be sales@superlumin.com, and there's a phone number on the contact page when we get to the end of the presentation. A shout out to one of my favorite guys. Most of you are probably very familiar with something called Moore's Law. Moore's Law posited that hardware capabilities will double every 18 months and will continue and will lower in price. That has helped companies like SuperLumin in our requirement to scale up and to scale down. Talking about scaling up first. All of the SuperLumin code is full 64-bit. If you can buy the server and it supports SUSE 11 64-bit, we'll run on it, as long as it meets minimum requirements, which would be 1 to 2 gig of RAM and a 120 gig disk. That's become very easy to fit into a small profile, small form factor. But on the scaling up side, I'm not familiar with any vendor approaching the 4096 CPU mark at this point. When they do, because we can't say they won't, we will be able to support all 4096 of those CPUs. We can support the 16 terabyte limitation of 64-bit SLES 11. We can support 64 disks, and that can be extended. We haven't had any customer come anywhere near that, as they have built very large servers. But I'm told to remind everyone that if you come up with a reason that we need 96 disks in a system, give me a call. Another arbitrary limitation that we thought would last quite a while for us is 32 gigabyte as the maximum size of a given object that we can cache. That's pretty serious. So I believe that will accommodate a Blu-ray ISO. Again, if anyone has a requirement for a 64 gig device or object that needs to be cached, give me a call and we can make that happen. So massively scalable in the real world. We're not just talking about the theoretical, which is the first set of bullets. We have implementations in the field that are running very large environments, very high throughput, large populations of users, and we have the ability to do significant clustering capability in version 3. I'll leave CCA as an undefined acronym at this point to make sure that you stick with us till we talk about version 3. On the scaling down side, this has become a more significant part of our business than we anticipated. And it is working with organizations with lots and lots of locations with little tiny pipes going to each of them. So in the retail world, as a classic example, large retail firms, companies that can't afford to put 10 pipes into 2,000 locations, they will have something along the 1 meg or less. And they still want to use rich media on tablets or digital signage or lots of other ways to consume that sort of media in these locations and not have to upgrade hundreds or thousands of internet connections to make it happen. So having a device that StrataCache calls a Dart, running SuperLumin Nemesis, deployed to dozens, hundreds, thousands of locations makes wonderful business sense and provides a significant value to those organizations. So the other side of that is, now what do I do when I have all these devices? And the answer that we have come up with is another StrataCache company, or from another StrataCache company called Activia. And we'll have a little more on that a little later. So what's new and what's coming? It's been a while since we've gathered here together, so I wanted to start with version 2.2 as a baseline. Back in July 2011, we released 2.2 with this list of enhancements and additions: the single sign-on for eDirectory and added support for NTLM. This might be of interest to a lot of Novell customers that are looking at domain services for Windows or are looking at Active Directory. And it pains me to say that as a 20-year systems engineer for Novell, but understanding the realities of how networks work and how they evolve, SuperLumin is making the same moves on the back end that you need to make with your networks. With the 2.2, we were only supporting versions of NTLM running on Windows up to 2003. We've since fixed that. And we have also added form-based authentication for NTLM, LDAP, and radius sources as of 2.2. We added our initial support for Activia with 2.2 and provided a role-based administration model that you can give the keys to this part of your caching configuration to specific individuals. Also, FTP log push, and there's more to that story as we move through these releases. Remote access and site-to-site VPN management built into the GUI. The ability to bond NICs, and I believe VLAN support was also in 2.2. That might be 2.3. Customization of the logging, which is important for a lot of the border manager customers that had to build their own custom solutions for digesting border manager logs and turning that into meaningful information. We also provided the enhancement to our MySQL-based reporting module that runs on the server to export those reports instead of just looking at them through your browser. Later in 2011, we released 2.3. That's where we added support for or incorporated Service Pack 1 for SLES 11, enhanced the NTLM support, so we're able to support anything from Samba to DSFW to NT4 to Windows 2008 R2. It's notable that the SuperLumin server is able to support multiple authentication profiles at the same time. So we can join to a domain for this group of users while supporting eDirectory single sign-on for these users and form-based basic authentication for yet another group of users. Basic authentication was required for a number of the legacy devices that folks have been using with their proxies since the beginning of time. And we released our Netflix cache. That's probably not of direct interest to folks on the call unless you're running an ISP on the side. This was a significant enhancement that we have running in some pilot organizations. The support extends to anything from PC-based players to tablets to your Blu-ray players, Roku boxes, PlayStations, anything that can get to Netflix will benefit from the caching of that. On the high availability side, we added support for a very cool piece of hardware from Niagara, or from Interface Masters is the company. Niagara is the line of adapters that provide a fail-through. So if there is a hardware issue, power supply blows up, or software fails for whatever reason, the Niagara NIC will turn into a bridge, which means in environments where you cannot lose access to the internet, that this NIC will allow you to build a server that will heal itself or heal the network if there is a failure with the cache and you only have one of them. And you lose, of course, any access control capability, but that lets you make the choice. Is it more important that I have to approve every location my users go to, or is it more important that users never lose access to the internet? We put some new changes in the single sign-on to accommodate a number of complicated scenarios where users are changing their passwords in creative ways. Let's leave it at that, and I'm sure the network administrators on the line are familiar with some of the things that users do to make your life interesting in that area. Now, 2.4, now shipping. This is the version, the latest, greatest. SLES 2 service, SLES 11 Service Pack 2 gives us access to all of the latest hardware provided by any and all of the server vendors. We added something that users have asked about, and I am unsure if I'm going to be able to show this at the end, but I can at least show you a page where users might be listed. The ability to see exactly who is authenticated to the cache. And if we didn't have everyone on mute, I'm sure there would be an overwhelming applause, screaming, yelling, etc. You're welcome, and thanks, Mark. Another request for a bit of work, a hard feature to build, was the automatic archiving and emailing of all of the configuration files so that you automatically maintained a library of your server configuration along with the license file and the certificates. Those were key pieces that were sort of missing from our configuration export in previous versions. So these are kind of the missing pieces that can be done manually and can be scheduled to be stored off the box somewhere, emailed to you or one of your friends. Public certificates were another area where we had some issues, and we partnered with DigiCert to make sure that we nailed it. So we now have enhanced certificate management and have a document that's available on request until we get it actually posted on our Knowledge Center of step-by-step. How do I work with my SuperLumin server and with DigiCert to request, receive, install, and use public certificates that won't cause your users to get a certificate error for the form-based authentication. I understand that there's a lot of education community on this particular call as well, and this has been where it's been most needed, and that's been the guest wireless network, where they want to make the network or internet access available to parents with iPads watching kids play basketball or whatever the case may be. And having the certificate error was not something that they wanted their guests to face. So this is now something that we can fix. DigiCert has been very helpful, and yes, this is a plug for them. Our enhancements will technically allow you to use any of the public certificate vendors. Of course, we're going to keep the DigiCert name on our documentation for the assistance that they provided. There have also been a number of important enhancements to our transparent proxy. One of the dark arts was figuring out what exactly do I need to set up as a packet filter to redirect my port 80 traffic to my transparent proxy. This might be a little alien to most Border Manager customers in that Border Manager did have technically a transparent proxy, and between us, we all know it really didn't work. So I am only familiar with a handful of customers, gluttons for punishment, that were successful in using transparent proxy with Border Manager. It is rock solid in SuperLumin, and a significant number of Border Manager customers that have upgraded to SuperLumin are taking advantage of forward proxies and transparent proxies, all combined on the same box or spread across multiple boxes. We provide a checkbox when you create your transparent proxy for it to automatically take care of the packet filters required to make it work. And in large-scale environments, there's a requirement for automatic proxy bypass in a number of scenarios. Very implementation specific, but full control in the management GUI as to how to make that happen. These aren't enhancements that are technically directly SuperLumin, but are very important in the result of what you can do with your SuperLumin server as it relates to distribution of caches over a lot of locations, or if you require content to be pushed to your caches in an automated fashion. Omnicast is a StrataCache company that focuses on content distribution. So on its own, with or without SuperLumin, it is used for distribution of media through the internet, through enterprise networks, through virtual enterprise networks, etc. In many of those scenarios, a cache is a key piece of the architecture, I should say, and we have done a lot of work to enhance both sides of that equation. So Omnicast able to take advantage of a SuperLumin server at the destinations or along the way, and the Nemesis boxes instrumented to interoperate with Omnicast. The other StrataCache company that we are getting more tightly integrated with is Activia. And as noted at the bottom bullet, this is different. Jamie Lee Curtis does not endorse StrataCache Activia, and we're wondering where our lawyers were, as Activia has been around for probably close to 10 years. Activia gives us that massively scalable management environment. If you have dozens, hundreds, or thousands of caches that either share the same configuration or have a specific configuration for these 300 and another configuration for these 12, Activia and the Constellation Manager are the tools that you would use to do that. Not to raise hopes for folks with 2 or 3 servers. This is not a solution that you will find viable for moderately sized, for smaller organizations with a couple of caches in place. It becomes valuable and powerful when you have into the dozens, up to the hundreds, and onto the thousands of these devices. Finally, this is Crown Jewel working to deliver in 2013. They won't tell me anything more specific because they know that I would tell you. So what I can do is tell you the key technologies, the key features that will be the centerpiece of version 3. I teased you with CCA as an undefined acronym early in the presentation. That is the SuperLumin Coordinated Cache Array. This is not as applicable to the scaling down side of the business, not at all. This would be absolutely applicable to the scaling up side of the caching business. With the CCA, we virtualize, a way to think about it here is that we virtualize the shared cache of this number of servers. If I have 4, 10, however many caches behind this fancy layer 4 switch, the caches that are stored on each of those servers essentially become available to every other server in the cluster. This allows capacity to be added to the entire cluster as a whole, as a single unit, by adding servers to that cluster. So this goes to high availability and scalability and performance for looking forward to the day where SuperLumin caches are caching the entire internet. And that's only half kidding in terms of the capacity that this CCA technology will provide. So we will stand by that highlighted bullet, most scalable proxy cache solution ever conceived. The part that most of you will be able to take advantage of and appreciate will be the full redo of the graphical user interface for our web-based management. So having long exchanges with the engineer who's driving the development and the requirements, design principles, etc., I'm sure we are on the right track. I'm very much on board with everything that he's talking about. One thing that has come up as we've worked with a lot of customers in setting up evaluations, in implementation phases of more complex configurations, you can get kind of deep through the forward proxy into the policy management, into the rules, into the policies. And when you want to apply the change, you have to hit the OK button, 5, 6 times. That has become known as the Pesci syndrome, for those of you who are familiar with Lethal Weapon. The OK, before you can apply those changes. I've been promised that one of the benefits, not one of the focal points, but one of the real benefits of this new GUI will be a real-time application of changes without having to jump back through numerous layers. So there's a convenience factor there. And I know the other side of that two-edged sword is that existing users will be accustomed to clicking OK, and we'll have to get you out of that habit and give you back those moments in your life. Another enhancement, which isn't actually part of Nemesis 3, but will be released in tandem with version 3, is a new log server. Log server will provide a way for any number of SuperLumin servers to consolidate the logging. We will take the SQL-based reporting that we have on each server and apply that or build that into and enhance it on this centralized log reporting server. We have a sneak peek of the new GUI. And you may want to blow this up. I'm sorry, that's as big as I could get it on my slide without, couldn't cover up that SuperLumin logo. But you can see the new design elements, and this is specifically interface for the logs server. So you'll have to use your imagination if you're familiar with the existing SuperLumin GUI as to how that would translate. One more of those. And I think we're ready for any questions, Amy.
Okay, again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put those through on the chat or the Q&A. We'll give it a couple minutes to see if any come through. I haven't seen any yet.
So for those not asking questions now, for some contact information, please do register for access to the Knowledge Center if you have not already. And if you would like a copy of the presentation or have other sales-related questions looking for more information, please do send email to sales@superlumin.com.
Okay, I do see one question here. If we plan to migrate from Border Manager to Nemesis next year, is there a way to import filters.cfg from Border Manager, or should I do that all manual?
When we looked at Border Manager and the corresponding features and capabilities, we tried to find a way to make that happen. The fact is that we have a number of the developers that were involved with Border Manager on the team, and they've learned way too much to be constrained by the way things were done with Border Manager, and you will have to do it manually.
Okay, and then one other question here. Can I migrate VPN configuration from Border Manager to Nemesis? And then they also said we have S2S VPN between us and a company in Germany.
We are using the site-to-site VPN technology that's in SUSE Linux. It has some things in common with the Border Manager VPN, but we are totally open source. So there will not be a direct interoperability with the Border Manager VPN to a SuperLumin VPN. And that also will have to be reconfigured from scratch on the SuperLumin server. And for this or the previous question, if that raises more issues, if we need to have a conversation, the contact information is on the screen. Email is the best way to get hold of me, at least for the rest of this week, and we will definitely get your questions answered.
Okay, perfect.